Bobby Torres of Frightbox Recording here. Now, people often say to me, Pro Tools is so overpriced. It's so dated. There's so many better options out there. Why are you still using it? And honestly, this is a valid question. But before I get into my reasons for still using Pro Tools, I just want to say this. It does not matter what DAW you use. There are professionals making hit records on Cubase, Ableton, Logic, Studio One, Reaper. I could go on and on and on. The DAW that you use does not matter. Now, yes, Pro Tools still sort of is the industry standard, but it does not hold as much weight as it once did. As long as your DAW can export standard WAV files, you're good to go. Just pick a DAW that you enjoy the workflow of and stick with it. Now, me personally, even though I do use a few different DAWs, for example, I love using Logic for programming. I use Reaper for live recording because Reaper, to me, even though it's only $60, it's by far the most stable DAW I have ever used. I've used Reaper on super duper cheap PCs and I've never had it crash once. Fortunately, I can't say the same for Pro Tools. Now, with that being said, Pro Tools is still my go-to DAW for recording and mixing music within the studio. So I have a few reasons why I still prefer Pro Tools. One of the reasons is I love how clean and minimal Pro Tools is. I'm a minimalist. I do not like tinkering endlessly with tons of plugins and just gear in general. And Pro Tools is extremely simple. I love how its routing is very similar to an analog console. It can be as simple or as complicated as you would like it to be. I know this is the case with many DAWs. There's just something about the way Pro Tools is laid out. The signal flow is very analog in nature. Also, I love the way it handles file management. Again, I use multiple DAWs, and for some reason, just the way Pro Tools handles files, like for example, if I just double click on the file right within my edit window, I can rename the file and it automatically names the file in my audio files folder and just copy them off of my hard drive. It's as simple as that. In Logic, it can be a little tricky. Also, I found in Reaper, it can be very tricky depending on how you have your Reaper set up, but I just love the way that Pro Tools handles files. It's just personal preference. I know people who started on Logic, and to them, Logic handles files in a much more logical way. But for me, again, I just love the way Pro Tools handles files. Another thing is I love the way that Pro Tools handles editing. I edit audio in Reaper as well, and to this day, I still prefer Pro Tools when it comes to music editing. I do a lot of metal, a lot of technical death metal, crazy genres like that, and I had to be very specific with my edits. And Pro Tools is cursor-based, so the way that it works is I could just simply click, drag, move around very, very efficiently. And if I was doing sound design or something like that, I would probably be using Reaper for that specific reason, just because Reaper is super flexible in a way when it comes to single track audio editing. But for me, when I have to do complex drum edits and things like that, I just love the way that Pro Tools handles those edits. Also, I'm a huge fan of the way that Pro Tools handles grouping. And when I say grouping, I mean edit groups. So what I mean by this is in Pro Tools, you can have, for example, an edit group that contains all of your drum tracks, but then you can have an edit group within an edit group. So let's say all of your drum tracks minus your kick drum. Then you can have an edit group within that edit group where it's just the cymbals. You could kind of do this in Logic, but it's just way more clunky in my opinion. And I work, again, on a lot of technical music where I have to be very, very specific with my edits. And I haven't really found another piece of software that handles editing in this way. Again, it's just what I'm used to and it's my preference. And that's why I love Pro Tools for this specific reason. And the last point I want to make is that I've been using Pro Tools for 14 years. That's a long time. Not only that, Pro Tools was my first DAW. It's what I'm used to. There are people out there that have been using Steinberg's products, for example, Cubase, since the 90s, and to them, Steinberg is the end-all be-all. It really comes down to what you're used to and what you're comfortable with. I'm comfortable with Pro Tools. Again, I do use other DAWs. I've tried switching close to a dozen times, and I always end up going back to Pro Tools because it's what I'm used to. Even though Pro Tools, yes, is very pricey, and some of its features are kind of dated, it kind of makes up for that in some of the reasons I previously mentioned. I just love its editing. I love how simple it is. I love how clean it is. I love the way it handles file management. Also, Pro Tools' import session data is extremely detailed and very specific. I think Cubase is now starting to catch up, but that's the thing. When you try switching DAWs, it's kind of a slippery slope. Now, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video is I do not want you getting caught in the trap of constantly switching your DAW. You will end up wasting tons of time. Take this from me, that's why I own multiple DAWs. I've tried switching from Pro Tools multiple times. The amount of time that it would take me to switch DAWs and learn a whole new workflow for all the things that I do in terms of metal production, it's just not worth the time. I'm better off sticking with Pro Tools. Unless it becomes astronomically expensive where I'm forced to switch. For me, it's worth the cost just because, again, I'm efficient with it and I've been using it for 14 years. and I know it inside and out, and my whole studio is built around it. So again, pick a DAW that you like the workflow of and stick with it. I don't care if it's Studio One, Logic, Cubase, it really doesn't matter. They all do the same things, just stick with one. If you found this video helpful, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And do not forget to click the little bell icon in order to be notified every time I upload one of my weekly videos on all things metal and rock production. You can both like and follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Links are in the description below. And if you'd like, you could download my free quick EQ guide that contains all my EQ settings that I always return to when starting a mix. There is a link below within the video's description. Until next time, happy recording.